people, if we're not filling in the blanks, we give the right to you all to fill in those blanks for us. You don't have to like what we say, you don't have to agree with what we say, but you know what it is. If we're to truly move forward, this is about teamwork. And I realize, as somebody who grew up in Minneapolis, specifically South Minneapolis, and got a little bit of North Side sprinkled in me too, right? But as somebody who grew up in there and just seeing all of the changes, I felt unsafe in the 80s, and I think people feel a lot more unsafe now. When we're talking about partnering with our law enforcement officials, when we're talking about, you know what, we need the community to call us and tell us what's going on. Knowing that not everybody feels comfortable with calling law enforcement, but everybody wants help. I don't want to ask for help, but I need help. That's where we need all of your help, right? Because everybody knows, not everybody, but a lot of people knows what's going on in the streets. What I want to do is change that whole idea of that we are out here just to lock people up. I'm a sheriff that stands for accountability, but also reform. We have to do both. We have to stop the rhetoric like we have to do one or the other. We can do both. But nobody deserves to be in their homes, in their neighborhoods, going to schools, going to parks, going anywhere feeling unsafe or wondering about if their loved ones are gonna come home. Nobody deserves that. So what I'm saying to you is we are all in this. We gotta recognize though, right, people have a real reason to not trust this profession. We have to say that out loud. But what I'm here to tell you is that there are a lot of good people in this field doing it for the right reasons, and you gotta give them a chance. Nobody likes to be stereotyped, so how about let's not stereotype, right? I'm a black woman in a uniform. I got 3 check boxes right there. This is what I'm gonna say to you. I trust everybody up here on the stage. I believe that everybody has the right initiative in this one. What I'm telling you is work with us. We will answer your questions as best as we can. We will be transparent best as we can, but there's this one little thing that we got a problem with. We can't always answer something right now because we'd rather get it right than be quick about getting answers. So we're doing business different. Those doors are open, and y'all know I talk a lot. I say that at every speech. So I'm gonna cut myself off. Somebody might trip me. But open it up for questions after everybody's done doing their intro.
First off, I'd like to say that this is home for me. I've been involved in Minneapolis for over 30 years. I work with the Minneapolis Police Department in every precinct and almost every unit that it's offered. A lot of you I have met over the years, and I even have my field training officer and sergeant standing over there, so I'm sure she's going to evaluate me at the conclusion of this. But I say that just to give you an idea of what it takes to bring community together. Violence, unfortunately, has been a driving factor for demanding it. They didn't just ask, it was demanding. We have to do this for our children, our aunts and uncles. In every different phase of my law enforcement career thus far, I've tried to use mother's love since its inception. Each one of you ladies out there, think, I've seen you in action. I've seen you take initial steps through community law enforcement cooperation. I've seen them de-escalate some of the most violent situations that a police officer in the community would have to witness, and have it come out the other side with everybody understanding that it was done for the right things, for the right reasons. So thank you, Reverend McAfee, the U.S. Attorney, and my partners up here. And I'll tell you right now that I've never seen the level of cooperation between law enforcement agencies that I see today. We know each and every one of us up here, we meet frequently. The U.S. Attorney manipulates our meetings to make sure that we get to know each other. But that's exactly what needs to happen. Because in the times of crisis, it's too late to start handing out your business card. It's too late to start walking through the neighborhoods and saying, hey, I'm here to help. They gotta know. And as we are all assembled here today, that was text and Lucy reaching out and said, hey, we gotta all come together for you. And so we're here. Now something briefly about my organization. I too am a presidential appointee, which means President Biden tapped me on the shoulder and the Senate confirmed me, bringing me back to the city that I call home, the state that I call home, to conduct a law enforcement activity a lot of people don't know about. The United States Marshal Service was the oldest law enforcement agency in the country. It was established in 1789. So ever since then, we've had one function, and is that to go after the fugitives that have escaped justice. Many of them are recidivists. That's that big fancy word a long time ago that those individuals that just don't learn. They'll keep bumping their head in the wall and causing mass confusion and fear to everybody out there that they come in contact with. So with that being said, there's a lot of criminal activities associated with those individuals. Everything from trafficking, abduction, or just refusing to be held accountable for the crimes they've already committed. When the marshals come, they know exactly why we're there. So as we continue in this partnership, we want to make sure that they know you can run, but you can't hide. Everybody in here is here for you, the community, and for each other to make sure it's safe, sound, and we all, I say again, we all go forth and do great things.
Sheriff is going to go rebuttal there for a minute. My name is Lugar. I'm the special agent in charge for ATF. ATF is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. We are the federal agency charged with investigating gun crimes, and that includes enforcing the National Firearms Act, which is machine guns. We had a huge problem with machine guns, clock switches. Getting better. We've had some very good cases out of that. And unfortunately, I'll tell you guys now, the penalties for selling fentanyl and having a switch on your lock is extensive. It's huge. Now, I will echo one of the themes here that nobody has made it quite as clear. I don't have to put anybody else in jail the rest of my career. I don't want that. Jail's bad, prison's bad. I don't ever want anybody else to go there. I'm judged on whether violent crime goes down. That's our business, everybody up here. If I could come out and speak to a bunch of folks and say, hey, let's do this and this and this, great. If violent crime goes down, great. Probably get a raise. I don't want to put anybody else in jail. But law enforcement starts at the activity, at the bang, if you will. When that happens, then law enforcement gets involved, ATF gets involved, the marshals, etc. Everybody else is left of that bang. Schools, churches, families, community groups. I will do whatever I can to stay left of that bang. I'll come out and speak to anybody, as will everybody else here. I'll tell folks if they're on a bad path, I'll tell folks if they're on a good path. I'm happy to do that anytime for anybody. And the reason is because I want to stay left of that bang. I know some of you have questions about the actual roundup. ATF was the lead agency for highs. So I've got some information on that, but there's a lot of it that's going to be still to be put out into court. So we won't do a lot of details. But if you want to talk generalities as to how we look at people, one of the things that ATF does, anybody out there familiar with the Hennepin system? Hennepin is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. When guns leave behind shell casings, those shell casings are distinct for each individual gun, and we use that along with other information to link crimes together. A shooting at one place, a shooting at another place, a shooting in St. Paul, a shooting in Iowa. And we use those clues to solve shootings to point us toward both who's pulling the trigger and who's buying the guns for those folks. So we do scientific evidence examination, and that points us toward who the perpetrators are. Let's see, I can go on all day. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to my partner at DEA, and I will echo one last thing. There is no daylight between any of us here. I have folks embedded with the Sheriff's Department, with the PD, they have folks embedded with us, marshals. I'm going to tell you something. If you want to really get Marshal Frizzell's attention, go out to eat with him. You can get outside a plate of bacon and eggs pretty quick. It's interesting to watch. As can I guess. Thank you all again for having us here. Pass it over to the DEA.
Thanks, Will. It's great that you said I'm going to pass it over and you continue for 5 more minutes. All right, folks, my name is Rafi Matei. I'm the head of DEA here at Minneapolis. I'm not originally from Minneapolis like a lot of the good folks up here. I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico, which means that when I got here last January, all that white stuff that was all over the city was pretty alien to me. But I'm glad it's gone now, so Reverend, this temperature is just perfect. So DEA, so what do we do? A lot of people know what we do from, Narcos TV, Netflix shows, and that kind of stuff. So that's part of what we do. We do 3 things. We do them well. We enforce the Controlled Substance Act, means we go after drug traffickers and drug distribution networks that are out there at the international and national level. We do drug diversion, which is when doctors are writing scripts for non-medical reasons, and those medications that are legitimately prescribed to you are end up on the streets being sold illegally. And then we do outreach, which is what we do here with you guys. So we're always happy to come out and share that message and take questions. If I could say, I know I'll get some questions later, but if I could say one thing that I need you all to understand is there is no legitimate pills or medications that you can buy off of social networks. If it's on Snapchat, it ain't good for you. If you want a legitimate pill, you gotta go to a legitimate doctor and get them at a legitimate pharmacy and get them from the pharmacist. If you're getting them from a friend who said who got them from a friend, who said who got them from somebody that they knew that claimed that they were real stuff, they got them on the internet, it could kill you, literally. 2022, we had 107,000 people die from just that. So if I can leave you with just the one thing is, pills don't get bought on the internet. And if your kids are doing it, or if you know somebody that's doing it, there's a 6 in 10 chance that they're going to die from that. So it's serious business. The other thing I will echo is, like, everybody here, there's no daylight between us. We all work together. We all share our information. We're constantly talking to each other. Where my jurisdiction or my authorities end, the sheriffs or the chiefs will start. And, if we have a guy that absconds and, we call Eddie and he goes and gets him. Drugs and guns, like the sheriff said, go together. So Will and I talk often. And obviously, our friends at the FBI have a catch-all. They enforce a lot of other stuff. So they're all over with all of us. So our friendships here are good because it means that we are all here to work for you. Thank you.
I don't think I can top that, especially when you call me your friend. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Michael Krause. I'm an assistant special agent in charge, which means I'm the number 2 person here in the FBI in the Minneapolis field office. My primary responsibilities all center around counterintelligence and then all the criminal programs has been expressed, and I think Mr. Lugar started it off really highlighting a lot of things, and my peers, the sheriff and the chief both really highlighted, I think, the importance of what we're talking about here tonight and why it's important to have the partnerships. The simple thing, I can talk about the wide range of what the FBI does, because it ranges from national security matters all the way to crimes against children and community outreach. But in the end, our mission is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. That's all that it really breaks down to. From a federal level, that is what our mission is and what we try to do. And one of the unique things for like myself and the organization and these partnerships is I sit here and I work with all of these people in a seamless way as we do with the communities. And it's from the standpoint of making sure that you can live safely in your communities, trying to restore order. It's not about putting people in jail. It is about protecting the American people. On the upholding the Constitution, that is the accountability. My teams actually were the teams that did the investigation from the federal level related to the death of George Floyd. In the same vein, I'm also the partner, and my teams are the partners in combating violent crime. And one of our focal points and one of our focuses as it relates to violent crime is really trying to use intelligence-based, strategic, informed decisions to be able to do investigations. And that is why it's important to have partnerships and an understanding about what's going on. It's why it's important to have the community involved. I did community development when I was in Baltimore back in the 90s before I ever came into the FBI. And I worked in neighborhoods working on community projects trying to redevelop. And I was having a conversation with Lisa Clemens just before, and I said, I'm a firm believer that it takes a village or an entire community. Of course, Lisa turns around and shows me the back of her sweatshirt. But it's true, and we need to come together from the standpoint that we are all part of the community, that it takes all of us to be the solution. And we're here to listen to questions, try to learn more, but also to know that we're here to do a job to make sure that we are holding those people that are destroying your neighborhoods, disrupting your neighborhoods, that are doing the most egregious acts of violence accountable so you can restore order and reclaim your neighborhoods. So I look forward to your questions, and thank you for having me here this evening.
Chet, thank you all so much. Listen, we have this microphone right here in the center where Sam at. Make sure that microphone is on so we ain't trying to run back and forth. So if you got different questions, you'll line up right in front. And remember, everybody repeat after me. Just hit your neighbor and say, neighbor, no cussing in the church. I just thought I'd say that in case some of y'all just get kind of overexcited and forget where you at. So you line up. I want to start this question, and any of y'all can answer, because I think one of the things that we in the community a lot as well, and let me say that we have no problems, no issues with people who are hurting our people when they are arrested. No problems. I think one of the things that concern many of us is, especially as it pertains to drugs and guns, we get the low-hanging fruit, but the ones that we know is bringing the guns, selling the guns, bringing the fentanyl, we hardly ever see any of that, because most of them don't look like us, but we get heavy with us, but we don't see the other thing. And I think that's one of the, and I could be wrong, am I talking to somebody else too? That's one of the things that we see that's always a question. Now you can get 45, okay, cool, they good, but we know they just ain't getting them guns, they ain't making them. There's no manufacturing plant, nor there's no fentanyl plant in Minneapolis. And so I know that's some of the things that people have said to me. So you just think about that, we'll talk about that later. But if you have questions for any of our panelists, you can come to this microphone right here. and you can let your question and direct it to whoever you want to direct it to. Y'all, this is Trisha. Give her a hand. And since I'm the pastor, I can do this. It was her son that was killed over a year ago. And Angela's daughter just got shot in a crossfire on Sunday. So the people in the audience is not disconnected from the reality. Go ahead, Trish.
I just want to express our thanks. When I got that call last week or the end of the week before, and they told me that 25 were arrested in connection with my son's murder, I cried. I cried because I was happy because the job had been started. It's a long road yet. But I'm saddened that 25 other of our kids that grew up with my son are just so stupid to follow somebody else's direction. I know this is a long road, and I just want to thank you. And I only want those that were arrested that had something to do with it to spend the rest of their life somewhere else. I don't care about no plea bargain, no nothing like that, because my son didn't get the plea for his life. I didn't get the plea to keep him here when I fought.
Amen. Anyone else? Now's the time if you hear something.
Hi, my name is Charlotte, and I have a question with regards to you, Chief O'Hare. So I really appreciate the work that you do, and I watched some of your clip. So I think that we are all members who love Minneapolis, and watching Minneapolis become Detroit, Baltimore is heartbreaking for everybody. It doesn't matter which ward you're a part of or who you are. It's heartbreaking. And we're trying to organize a grassroots kind of a gathering to come together because I believe that a lot of us believe that there's some serious issues with legislature that hasn't been updated. And it hasn't been updated before the pandemic, and everything has taken 180 turn, not 180, sorry, that's a gross exaggeration, but I exaggerate to make my point. And my question is there any conversation between you who has the deepest insight into what needs to change and how that could change, because only you can see that better than anybody else, with the politicians who are running this city, with the woke group that is destroying our city? Okay, no offense, but it's going to a complete opposite of just degeneration, and I'm just speaking for myself. But it is heartbreaking to see what's going on because we pour so much into our communities. And I think telling everybody to come together as a community, you got that. But if legislation is not changing to meet the demands of what's going on, then it's not you doing the hard work that you're doing, running down criminals, on foot, everything that's going on is, it's just, it makes one feel like it's hopeless.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Charlotte. So, there's so much I could say to that. I'll try and zero in on what's most important. I've been to St. Paul. I've been to the state capitol several times, trying to advocate for legislation to help us. And we have had some successes that just recently have been passed by both houses. Not everything that we asked for. But for example, it's incredibly difficult to become a police officer in Minnesota compared to elsewhere in the United States. And as part of the packages that were just passed, were to allow anyone with a bachelor's degree, anyone with an associate's degree, to go through an accelerated program so that I can then hire them to be a police officer from Minneapolis. So that's a huge barrier that exists here. The reality is you could be a lawyer, you could be a probation officer, you could be a psychologist, and I can't hire you to be a police officer unless you go to a community college policing program. So I believe that's a barrier towards getting our kids from Minneapolis to be police officer. It's probably set up in intentionally to keep certain people out. I mean, I suspect that may have happened 40, 50 years ago. And we just have to acknowledge that life is different today. Like, life in general is just different. And we have to update a lot of these rules, a lot of these statutes, so that the community can get what they expect and what they deserve in terms of service. So one thing we're not taught today, but I know you all know this is a real problem in our city, in our community today, is teenagers joyriding in stolen cars. Reverend mentioned it earlier, like the young people that are being affected by this, that are getting into accidents, crashing, dying in some cases, nearly dying, or getting more and more involved in very serious crime. Coming into contact with us or with the Hennepin Sheriff's Office a dozen times in a year, and still being out to either continue to joyride, continue to get more deeply involved in crime until they die or wind up in a coma themselves. So I think there's some legislative areas that we need to do. That's a very complicated problem here in terms of dealing with juveniles. I think part of what I would like to see legislatively in the future, a lot of times we had one night a couple of weeks ago between the sheriffs and us doing an operation together. I think we had well over a dozen kids that were in, I think, 4 different stolen cars. One of them might have been carjacked. But in a lot of cases, if kids are just joyriding in a car, they're not the person driving it, or they're not someone in a car that's in possession of a gun inside of it, they're immediately released. And that's not, we are failing those kids. We are failing, literally. We don't have, it's happening at such a frequency, such a high level that, just to put it in perspective, everybody knows about the situation with Kias and Hyundais, right? We're getting sometimes as many Kias and Hyundais stolen in a week as what used to happen in an entire year before the pandemic. That's the volume of problem, and that's the interactions that we're having, again, with a small group of kids over and over, and not having the ability to send them to places where they could actually get accountability, they could actually get service, or even just being able to hold them someplace for 24 or 48 hours where we know they're going to stay alive in that time. So I think it's a really, really complicated problem when we talk about juveniles, just because the situation today, the context today, life today is so different. But there are a lot of areas that we have to figure out legislatively. What do we do? How do we get all these different groups that are involved in the process to come together to share information, to try and better attack it together? But I think one thing that is for sure is we are not doing everything that we possibly can, and we need to get everybody together that's involved in this process to figure out what else do we need to do.
Okay, Chief, I have 2 different questions for you. First, yesterday this meeting with the county attorney, we were made aware that there is a thing called an override that cops can use. Are they aware that they can use an override? Understand that in the last year or so, there were 12 overrides and all were granted. 2 additional overrides were granted in the last couple of days. Are the cops aware they can use this override, and are they using that power? That was my first question. I'm going to ask them both to sit back down. The other piece I want to know is, what are you guys doing to repair the relationship with you and Minneapolis Public Schools, as the public school has become the battleground, it has become the actual block, and the teachers are not prepared to handle that type of stuff, and when the teachers are defending themselves and being fired. We had a teacher or an aide just fired up at a school. We had one of our guys escorted out of the schools when the level of violence does not meet educational needs. What are you doing to repair that relationship?
Thank you. To start off with the override situation, the last 2 weeks, I've been working on getting a directive out to my department that we've been tossing around. Actually, behind you is Commander Yolanda Wilkes. She's the new commander in the police department. She's overseeing the implementation unit, which for our settlement agreement, which will also include which will also include revising policies. So one of the policies she's been working on with her team is trying to get everybody together in the process so we can address as many of the issues with juveniles, and like you mentioned, overrides is one of them. The issue with overrides, we can request them, but there's only certain circumstances where we can. And a lot of this stuff is based on the RAI, risk analysis. I can't remember what the last thing is. There's like a point system for each of the offenses, and you can't add them up. Like you can't add, like if a juvenile's brought in one instance with 4 or 5 charges, I am told you cannot add up those charges to get like a higher score, which would then result in trying to have, an override, trying to detain these kids. So that's one issue, and we've been working with the county attorney's office and everyone else, the corrections in the county and everyone else to try and figure out how best we can work with what's available now. And yes, I have instructed the precinct inspectors and the supervisors to request overrides whenever possible, but it doesn't mean that just any time we bring in somebody, like we're able to do that. The second part of the question, if you just give me one word to remind me, what was it? The schools, yes. The schools, we're losing out, huge. I mean, if you think of it, like our kids that are most at risk, schools know about them, we know about them, like just being able to be present and to share information is very significant, both to do everything possible to try and help like the most at-risk kids, but also to make our kids aware of possibilities for them. For example, like, did you know, like Deputy Chief Gators is sitting right there. He oversees our community outreach, our recruiting, all those types of things. Did you know a kid from Minneapolis can graduate high school, can get a job with the police department, get a salary, and we will pay for you to go to college? And then at the end of that, we can hire you and then put you in the police academy? Like, because we don't have this relationship, like kids in our schools, in our town, don't know that. So it's very frustrating for me for many reasons. There's things that are happening in schools. It's concerning. There was a child that was murdered in Harding High School a couple months ago in St. Paul, right? So obviously, like, there's real issues, but again, it's not from our perspective. Like, we're not the ones choosing not to be engaged. So that's something that we're trying to figure out and trying to get ways. And yes, there's plenty of teachers who will tell us and who will whisper to us, yes, I wish you were here. Yes, I wish our SROs were back. We have a police officer now, Officer Crystal Scott, who's leading a pilot program to bring back the PAL program. She's in 4 of the different schools in the city right now. That's something that we're looking to expand upon, because especially now more than ever, we need to be able to have police officers be present, especially with young people in the city, in non-law enforcement situations. We can't have cops just showing up to do bad things and then think we're going to change perceptions on young people, think that we're going to somehow have relationships with young people. So it's extremely important, but again, it's not our decision alone.
I just want to add a couple of things to both of those questions. So when talking about the reassessment, one of the things we need to realize is that the reassessment was born out of the JDI program, Juvenile Diversion Alternative Initiative. Was based off of studies where there were a disproportionate amount of children of color who were being locked up longer than kids who were not people of color, and then sometimes sentenced longer for the same crimes committed by people who were not kids of color. So again, that came about 2007, 2008. That's where the reassessment, not just for Hennepin County, but the other metro county areas as well. I believe in Hennepin County, that reassessment was looked at again in about 2017. My daughter called me at the wrong time, so she was talking. Anyways, in 2017, what my proposal is that we really need to look at that reassessment again, and it needs to be adjusted for what we're seeing right now today. Because what's happening is law enforcement is being proactive. We're out there doing the work, but we do need a place to go. Right? And I want to be clear though, so that's our decision. Like when we engage with juveniles, and we're specifically talking about juveniles when we're talking about the reassessment, when we're interacting with them, we're the ones who are seeing everything firsthand. And at some point, people have to trust what we're doing. Martha Holt Demick, who's sitting right there, I'm gonna steal a line out of your book. Sometimes these kids need a break, right? They really do. Like, we can all agree that kids are impulsive. right? You got to slow them down. Did you ever give your kids time out, Mr. Lugar? He forgot where he was, y'all. No. But you know what? It might not stop anything in the long run, but can it slow things down for them to get a better idea of what they need to do? Again, the proposal should be is that reassessment needs to be looked at. So when we're catching kids in the heat of the moment, you know, it's like ridiculous. You find 4 or 5 kids in the car, and only the one with the gun is the only one who will meet the qualifications to be in the JDC. Well, they all had masks on, they're all hanging out the window, they were all in it together, and it wasn't Halloween. So they should all be available to go there until they figure it out, if for nothing else to save them from themselves. So, you know, I know one of the things that I fear is when we're thinking about some of the resources that are out there, such as, I won't even name the place, but like a non-secured facility where my team went to visit. Okay, what are the options when juveniles are dropped off here? Well, there's nothing that keeps them there. I fear that one day, one of those kids who we initially got off the streets for doing things that are dangerous are gonna go back out there, and all people are gonna see they were last in the hands of law enforcement. It's putting us in a bad spot. Again, we're not taking them there because of truancy. We're not taking them there for jaywalking. It's because they are engaging in dangerous behaviors that are dangerous to themselves and to their communities, and nobody deserves that. So, in regards to school resource officers, I was a school resource officer for 6 years. It was one of the best parts of my career. It really was. While some people will say that that's a gateway to prison, not if you got the right people there, because you know what? I may have been that one only cop that those kids trusted. And if they had even just one of us, that was always a good thing. As far as like the sheriff's office, okay, let me ask this. Was anybody in this room ever a part of DARE? If so, don't be shy, raise your hand. So because there's been resistance for law enforcement in the schools, and because we see what's going on with drugs in our communities, the sheriff's office has reinitiated DARE programs as a way to get back to our young kids, and so that they can get used to seeing us in a community way and not just always responding. When we're responding to things, people typically will see us in a bad light. We need more opportunity for people to see us proactively so they can learn about the people that are in these uniforms. It's not going to happen if we're running call to call. Another thing with the school resource officers in the DARE, but the superintendents in the entire county to Minneapolis, as well as the principals. We did send out our students, up to 4 students from every school to be a part of the Sheriff's Student Advisory Board to show them that they do have a voice in this. So that's another way of us reaching out. We're having to be creative with ways of reaching out to our younger people in a proactive manner, because the reality is if some of those doors are closed. So when people ask us, what do we need to help, we need people to say we want them there. You know, this question about the school resource officers, are you talking to your superintendents and your principals? Because you know what, those loud voices are usually the negative ones. We need your help getting us there. And again, accountability on our part is making sure we have the right people in those positions, especially when it's dealing with our young people.
Only one thing I want to add on to what the sheriff's saying, again, going back to the stolen cars. Another legislative change we need. Makes no sense to me. If you're riding around, 4 or 5 kids, masks on, whatever, in a stolen car, and the ignition cylinder's gone, and there's a screwdriver where a key is supposed to be, you should be charged the same way the driver's charged.
So before I ask my question, I wanted to say thank you to Chief O'Hara. I reached out to him, as I often do, again, I just hurt sometimes. But I talked to him about black women in the Minneapolis Police Department not being placed in command positions. I left the police department in 2001. There was not a black woman in a command position, but one before that, but never one after that. And I was always surprised because our numbers are so low. Why we were never represented in the command position. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your promotion to Yolanda Rose as a new commander in the Minneapolis Police Department. I got a big old heart. Okay, so now let me get down to what I was saying here. I want to say thank you. The reason I asked you guys to come here was because when the U.S. Attorney Lugar first came out over a year ago, I knew in his tone and in his message that he was not here to play. He was here to make us safe in our community, whether we wanted him to or not. And I appreciate that. I reached out to him and I asked him to come on to KMOJ to deliver his message on the radio waves, because that is where we listen the most, that is where our kids listen the most. He did it. We went a step further and invited you guys. It was the ATF, U.S. Attorney, and aiders who came out to the Northside Community Center to talk to us again about what they were doing in our community and that they were here to stay and to make us safe, whether we wanted it or not. I wanted it, and I thank you for that. But the reason I want to talk about it is because our youth, this revolving door that we always talk about with our juveniles, that buck stops when they turn 18. And people need to understand it stops. The little brain don't mature, it stops when they turn 18. Our kids are in these cars, they're not just still in the cars, they have guns in those cars, drugs in those cars, they're shooting at each other from those cars. And whether you want to own this or not, if we don't do something now, we will have them sitting up here again talking about our young kids who are in federal custody. So if we better get real serious about what we're going to do as a community to work with law enforcement. You can like them, you can hate them, I really don't care. But we better get real serious about what we're going to do to take back our very own community before you up here crying about the federal government having custody of your children. That's the only thing I want to say.
She wanted to make a statement. So, my name is Lasagna Reese. Thank you guys for coming out. Really appreciate you. I travel all over the country. The one thing I always hear when anyone says I'm from Minneapolis is, what's going on up there? Right? And they equate Hennepin County with Minneapolis. Can y'all hear me now? Okay. So my name is Lasagna. Thank you. I travel all over around the country. And oftentimes I hear people say I'm from Minneapolis. What's going on with y'all up there? Y'all can't seem to get together, right? But they equate Hennepin County with Minneapolis. They don't see a difference between the two. So I'm curious to know, Sheriff, what are you doing in the community to really collaborate with Minneapolis? Because everyone equates them to be the same. And since we're so down for officers in the community, what are you guys doing to partner together? Even though you have the rest of the team up here, you guys are the two most visible when you're out on the street. So what are you guys doing to partner in the program that you're doing? Thank you.
Thank you. So just as a reminder, like the sheriff's office, the sheriff has certain statutory mandates that your municipality or your city agencies don't have. So it's not just the jurisdiction in Minneapolis, but we also have jurisdiction within the county, and so we have to make sure that we are a little bit everywhere. Some cities, such as Golden Valley, where we're contracted to be there right now because they do not, why y'all looking at me like that, Lieutenant? Okay. No. But contracted because, there is this statute about the sheriff's office, and it says the sheriff shall keep the peace in the county. However, when we're talking about partnerships, we have deputies that are embedded with DEA, ATF, FBI. We are being collaborative because we all understand that, while we may have rules and we may have certain boundaries that we have to stay within, criminals don't. So you got to be able to make sure you have a full force multiplier in order to deal with the things that are going on within the entire county. Some of the other things that we're doing is making sure that we're meeting with people inside and outside of Minneapolis. I will tell you, I've been asked multiple times by cities, not in Minneapolis, who say that what's going on in Minneapolis, why are all of our resources going to Minneapolis, because they too understand that I have an obligation to serve the entire county. When we have cities that have primary agencies, such as like a Minneapolis or a Plymouth, yes, they have that primary duty to respond. But for the sheriff, you know, we go where we're asked, we go where we're needed, we go where we see we need to be. And as I've said to anybody that would listen, I'm not going to be the sheriff to say you're not there to help. That is my job, and I plan on living up to it.
Good evening. Thank you. Oh, are you wanting to respond, Chief O'Hara?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The only add on to what the sheriff is saying, we talk every day. We see each other so much. She generally greets me in front of people by saying, "You again?" So, and yeah, we can't do it without all of our partners, but especially without the sheriff's officers that are with us every day, particularly the violent crime units. They're doing incredible work, and they're doing it together every day. So, thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, thanks, because I kind of felt like when you took the microphone, you again, just playing. So, I just want to say thank you guys for coming out. The reason why we got together is because we received so many phone calls, late nights. Myself, Miss Lisa, and LaTanya are on the phone trying to come up with a solution. When the press conference with many of you that stood in attendance about 3 weeks ago came out, the major question that the community continues to ask is, how does a RICO work? If you have never been inside of the federal law process,
This is going to be for me.
yeah, it's for you. Our community doesn't get that. However, our community is the community that stands inside of that system. So even tonight, just wandering and asking different people, do you have a question? Do you feel comfortable? If not, I will stand in the gap, because that's what we do. We stand in the gap for our community. So I'm wondering if you are able to explain the 35, because there's 35 reasons a person can land and find themselves inside of a RICO case. So I'm wondering if you could give us that, because that's what this is about. It's about informing and educating our community so that parents do not go through what my mother went through back when it was the war on drugs. We need to make sure that our next generation does not, my child, my son's child, his children, future generations do not continue to have a glamorization, because we now no longer have a war on drugs. We're not saying it, and I don't think that we will say it until after we hit the 5th year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. But what we have right now is a war on guns. And those guns, how are we tracing the ghost guns? How are we tracing those switches? What are we doing? So if you guys could explain that, it would be so beneficial. Am I right, community? Yeah. We would like answers to that.
So why don't I start with RICO? And I'll tell you, a lot more people knew about RICO than I thought. The police chief and I were at a school talking to students, and a 10th grader raised his hand all the way in the back and said, "I've been listening to you guys talk about violent crime, and I've been listening to you talk about gangs. Why don't you use RICO?" A 10th grader. We were at a meeting, Lisa, we were at the last meeting we had, where was that? That's right. And a guy raises his hand and he says, "Mr. U.S. Attorney, ATF, why don't you use RICO?" I offered him a job. Here's how it works, and it's both complicated and simple. And I say it's simple because I can understand it, and I figure if I can understand it, anybody can. This is a statute that makes it a crime to be part of a corrupt or violent organization. So that can be the mafia, which is why it was created originally. In 1970, a mob family, if you watch any mob movies or anything like that, is an organization that exists for one purpose, to commit crimes. That organization as a whole can be prosecuted under the RICO statute. And everybody who's part of it can be prosecuted if they engage in one of any number of crimes. Assaults, shootings, murders, robberies, drug dealing, and white-collar crimes, because businesses are prosecuted under RICO as well. And the mob pretty much got wiped out years ago in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, elsewhere, by use of this statute. I grew up and started as a prosecutor in New York, and I watched it work there. I watched the mob families get taken down one after another as a whole. Why is it effective? Because you don't have to prosecute individual crimes one at a time. So if you're involved in a shooting and somebody else is involved in a drug deal and we charge them separately, it takes a lot of time and it's a lot of person power to be put into that. They're investigated separately. We never connect them. This person could be acquitted because the jury doesn't think there's enough evidence, because they don't know that the shooting that happened over here is tied to a larger organization that sells drugs to make money, that kills people through drug sales, that kills people through shootings. It's all connected. And what people started doing years ago is switch from the mafia, which kind of ceased to exist in its current form, and started using this for large, violent organizations like gangs. We just didn't do it here. And I've seen it work in cities across the country. I've seen levels of violence go down through use of this statute. It's not a war on drugs, it's not a wide net. You only focus on the most violent, the most involved in those gangs. And our hope is that they can help us lead to where the guns are coming from, where the fentanyl is coming from. But these are the people that are murdering our sons and daughters, and I want to thank you, Tracy, for speaking and for having the courage to talk publicly. I can't imagine how hard it is, but you give us the courage to do what we do so that more people do not suffer this kind of violence. One of the reasons we use this statute that allows us to take down all members of a gang that are involved in this violence is to let people who are thinking about joining that gang in the next few years, let them know the cost is too high. Don't do it. And so our goal is to bring justice for you, Tracy, and others, and at the same time, hope that others who would think about joining the gang see that the cost is too high. As far as tracing the guns and what we do, Will is an encyclopedia on how this is done, but I will tell you this is a sea change from where we were before. Because every gun, every shot emits a cartridge. That cartridge has a fingerprint on it. And that fingerprint, not literally a fingerprint, but a tracing, you can trace that by a marking. And that marking ties that gun and that bullet to other shootings. We use this well in every case. We trace every single gun we can, every single bullet we can, to link them together so that we know that a shot fired over there is from the same gun as a shot fired over there. 6 months ago, we used other data and information to build a larger case than just that shooting. How did I do, Will? Pretty good. I don't know what if there was the rest of the question, but RICO is a very complicated statute, but it also is as simple as just that. A gang is nothing more than a criminal organization, and the people who are involved in the violence through that gang and the drug dealing that funds that gang and kills our kids, they're all going to get prosecuted under that statute. We want to meet with gang members long before they're charged, and we have been doing so to let them know what's coming so they'll stop and they don't need to be part of this. And I think it's effective. And I'll tell you, Lisa, I'll come back anytime you want me. I'll talk to kids. I'll talk to those that we think are at risk, because we don't want them to do this.
just to add on, and I know Pastor had a question earlier about where the guns are coming from. The majority of the guns that we recover in this area are stolen firearms. They're stolen out of primarily people's vehicles. They leave a gun in the vehicle and it gets stolen and it ends up in criminal hands and it then goes from shooting to shooting to shooting. We trace every single gun that's recovered. Any gun that's recovered in a homicide, any gun that's recovered in any kind of serious violent crime, we do an urgent trace on that, meaning within 24 to 48 hours we have an answer back. With all the shell casings that are left behind at scenes, depending on which agency takes them up, they will go to the Niagara machine at Hennepin County, at Minneapolis PD, at BCA, or to ATF. We put those in as soon as we get them, and 24 to 48 hours later, give or take, 24 hours is our goal, 48 hours is probably what's more average from the ATF side. We have linkages back to other shootings. We use that to look and see, okay, hey, this person's been involved. We look at three things, basically. Were you a suspect in a shooting? Were you the victim in a shooting? Or were you a witness in a shooting? And if the answer is yes to that 3 or 4 times, and it's under a year, you're involved in the game. So we'll start looking at you. We do have 2 other areas where crime guns come from. Besides stolen firearms, there are straw purchasers. We've done several cases with straw purchasers. That's somebody who goes to an FFL who has a clean record, lies to the FFL on their form, and buys a gun or multiple guns, sometimes at the instruction of a crook. Sometimes they do it just to make money. They sell at gun shows, things like that. And then the third part, which is much smaller, is some folks make them on their own. It is not illegal to make a firearm yourself if you are not prohibited from possessing firearms in the United States. It is illegal to sell those firearms that you make unless you have a license from ATF. I can go into a lot of details. If somebody wants to, I'll stay after. But everybody pretty set with that? Yeah. Okay.
The only thing I can add, as far as crime guns in the city of Minneapolis, a couple things. Yes, there's an unusually high number of guns that are stolen from cars in Minneapolis, and that's something that happens every week. People come from out of town, they park downtown, they come to events, they have all kinds of stickers, else on their cars, sign that said there's a gun in this car. It happens literally every week here. And what's different here than in other states, about 2/3 of the guns that end up in crime in Minneapolis originally were purchased legally in Minnesota. So that's different from what happens a lot of places, other places where crime guns are coming in from out of state. And the other thing that's different here is, because I know it was mentioned, boat guns, not unserialized firearms. Thankfully, that is not as bad here as it is on the West Coast, as it is in the Northeast and other places. But at the same time, that maybe there's just so many guns available in circulation in the state. So it's definitely an issue.
And I will tell you, we did have several prolific, that's the right word, right? Suppliers of privately made firearms, ghost guns. In fact, one of them was promoting ghost guns and fentanyl on Instagram, said, "Buy your murder gun from me." True story. He is doing 3 years now because we sent some undercover guys and we bought some guns from him. Anybody who pops up like that, let us know. We will investigate them right away. And change battery. Okay.
First, I'd like to say, if they have a Juneteenth program this year and they have a relay race, I want the chief to be on our team because he runs like a bat out of hell. I was sitting out here in the audience, and was on this side, and the thought occurred to me that I have either been detained, arrested, or prosecuted by every agency on that panel. And I don't dislike y'all. I like a lot of y'all for real, for real. All right. You know, my name is Sharif Willis. I'm one of the team members of 21 Days for Peace. We've been all over the city trying to help reduce crime and the level of violence. I've been out on different locations with Lieutenant Zimmerman, as there's 40, 50 shell cases all on the ground from these switches that's been out there. So I know firsthand how individuals are participating in different levels of crime and what impact it's having on our community. But there are a lot of people who are now voicing skepticism. They say 45 people were arrested. All of them can't be guilty. All of them can't be guilty. Now, I might be able to differ with that, but that's a different conversation altogether. What the question is that I would like for you all to express to those skeptical individuals is, how did you go about identifying these individuals, and what assurances can you give the community that the prosecution that they're going to receive is going to be above board?
So, thank you, Sharif. We go through a rigorous process of evaluating and deciding on who to charge and what offenses to charge them in. And so I can't today talk to you in detail about each individual. I can assure you and every single person here that we take our jobs very seriously. We are only looking at people who are heavily involved in the gangs, supporting and promoting the gangs, making sure the gangs succeed, and the number one focus is on the shooters and the murderers. So we're going to do more of this. And every time we do it, you can rest assured that we're doing it with great care, with great input from everybody up here as to who are the right people to focus on and who are not the right people to focus on. We take this very, very seriously. It takes a lot of work. The woman who asked the question about RICO, it is a rigorous process. It's one of the hardest things to do as a prosecutor, because not only do we need to figure out who the right people are, what the gang activity is, it all goes through a process in Washington where it has to get approved. 99% of the work that we all do doesn't need Washington approval. This does. And they ask us detailed questions. We go back and forth. So it's a very detailed and involved process. We take it very seriously. And I will come back and say that, Lisa, at any meeting, any time, because we're going to keep doing this. And we're already hearing from people we're talking to in the community that there are people who are deciding not to join a gang as a result of just this beginning. But it's got to be embedded in people's thoughts. It's got to be understood that this is a continuous process until we make a real progress in the gang violence and the gang membership. So I hope that answers your question. I lost the person who asked the question. Oh, Sharif. Yeah, that's right. Sharif, we're just not out there prosecuting people willy-nilly. We don't believe in that, and we take it very, very seriously and to heart, because we know the effect that this has.
Good evening, and my name is Valerie Castillo. I'm Philando Castillo's mother, and I appreciate seeing all of you this time. I've never seen this group before in one space. My original question, my queen over here asked before me about the RICO, why did these children qualify for the RICO Act? She already asked it, and you answered it. So, another piece to that is, did y'all find the kings and queens? You know, you got levels of organizations of crime. You got the people that bring the drugs into the country. You got people that brings the guns to the different states. And then you got your little small worker bees. And the people that I've seen on that list look like worker bees. I don't see y'all capturing the people that's actually bringing this mess into our communities. You know, a long time ago, it was said, take them drugs to the monkey neighborhoods. That means black folks, if you know that. But my original question got answered, so now I'm gonna go off script. Because my son, Philando Castile, there was a civil rights investigation done for him in Falcon Heights and St. Anthony Police Department. And if my information stands correct, Andy Lugar, you were a part of that. And I don't know who shut it down, if it was our former President Trump. When he came in, he shut down that Department of Justice, or if it was just Sessions. I don't know who it was. I don't care who it was. I want justice for my son. And I felt like this was the time and the place, because God sent me here. I want justice for Philando Castile. This started in with George Floyd, so don't get it twisted. I want justice for my baby. My baby gave the state of Minnesota 15 years of his life. He started working when he was 13. He worked for St. Paul Public School for 15 years. So you do the math. And to treat my son like he was nothing, he was a mentor and a role model for those schools in which he served. He knew all 500 children by name and their allergies and their PIN numbers. He paid for their lunches when they couldn't afford it. So don't do my son. I want that investigation finished or know where the status of it is. I appreciate you listening, but right now, I'm fired up.
I have a statement. Philando Castile was my friend also. Me and Philando worked together at St. Paul Public Schools for 11 years. And so when Philando was murdered, I just decided I'm going to jump on the other side of the aisle. So I am former State Representative John Thompson. And I thought I could make a difference in legislation. I did hear someone from the FBI say that protecting the Constitution and violent crimes was like the #1 priority of the FBI. And then I thought to myself, the United States of America has perpetrated some of the most violent acts known to mankind to black men who look just like myself. Also, I wanted to say, because I heard somebody say that we're failing our kids. No, the police aren't failing our kids. Schools are failing our kids. Parks and Recs are failing our kids. The Department of Corrections is failing our kids because I've never seen the Department of Corrections correct any behavior as long as I've been black, and I've been black for 50 years. And the last thing I'll say is it seems to me that time and time again, we figure out a way to incarcerate our brothers and sisters that look like me before we can educate them. This is the state of Minnesota where you get a gun before you can get an education. I remember the war on drugs also because I was a victim of the war on drugs as a college student at University of Minnesota Duluth, just coming to Minnesota to visit. And in the back alleys of Minneapolis, me and my friends were cavity searched in the back of the alley. And the officer said to me, and it was a black officer by the way, he said to me, Negro, I could change the way you live your life for the next 10 years. All right? So I don't want to hear that, and by the way, I want to get on your calendar, Chief. Because I've never had a chance to meet you. I don't know if you ever heard of me, but I definitely want to get on your calendar. I still consider you a rookie because you just got here in Minneapolis. So I look forward to getting on your calendar. I remember the war on drugs. And I remember the Just Say No campaign back in the 90s. And the war on drugs back then was nothing but a war on black men. As a matter of fact, were we lying about the drugs? Of course we were. Y'all remember that statement. And so now what I'm seeing is the war on drugs reincarnated throughout our communities, and y'all call it the war on violence, the war on gun violence, when in all actuality, our kids are screaming something louder to y'all that lock us up. When they're popping Percocets and don't care if it got fentanyl in it. They're jacking cars and they don't want to ride bikes. Our kids are screaming something